Right guys, welcome to this second extraordinary meeting of Middlesbrough Council. Before we start, I'd just like to say that this is the second subject is a very emotive subject, and I'm aware that we have people present personally affected by the issues. We've been asked before not to turn this into a political football, and I would ask that members respect that request. It is also the case that criminal investigations are ongoing, and there is a need to keep discussion to matters in the public domain. It is not appropriate to name individuals or the details of any cases that members may be aware of. I'd like to remind members of the public that this is a business meeting of the Council, and that whilst members of the public are welcome to attend and listen to the debate, they are not allowed to call out or disrupt the meeting. If any member of the public interrupts the meeting, they will be issued with a warning. If they proceed to interrupt with the meeting, they will be asked to leave the meeting. So I'll open it with apologies for absence.
Can we count those followed from the last meeting? And I think in addition we have Councillor Plano.
Councillor Plano, excellent. Any additional apologies? Move on to number 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? No. Move on to number 3. Ask Councillor Rathmell to outline the reasons for the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. This meeting is a sensitive subject and one that I think we all have compassion on. The reason it was called was to discuss the Council's current position in relation to Stanhope Castle and the inquiry, and also the recent updates provided by officers on the 19th of July. It was brought as the appropriate route an extraordinary meeting after a discussion with legal, because it doesn't require a motion, it requires some recommendations. And basically, for those that aren't aware and for the new members, Stanhope Castle was an institution that was run by the Home Office. It was also then Cleveland County Council's responsibility, and there are some abuse investigations, allegations and claims that arise of people's time there. And because Cleveland County Council no longer exists, of the authorities that formed Cleveland County Council, Middlesbrough have been appointed as the administering authority for any claims or allegations that have been raised. The criminal proceedings and the police investigation we have been conscious of before calling this meeting. Again, working closely with legal, discussing it and waiting for approval to bring this to full council. What we're looking for, everybody's aware that a senior officer had to go to this inquiry and give evidence from the authority's perspective, which is, and it may come across as clinical and sound clinical, but it was a liability perspective. And I think we can all acknowledge that that officer also answered and was asked questions way beyond their remit, which was unfair because they related to social care issues effectively. So I'd like to commend them for attending and the bravery in going down there and representing the authority. And I'd like to acknowledge that it was difficult circumstances, but as it stood, we as an authority, members weren't made aware of the inquiry and our involvement in the inquiry. And the fact that we said we wanted to go down there as an authority, it was kind of secret, which at the same time has an impact on the individuals, because there are victims, there's allegations have arisen because of people's time there, and we should be seen to be discussing it whilst being compassionate, because it is perceived after speaking to some of the victims that we don't care whether the liability arises, the allegations are true or not. We can't say that's being dealt with under another channel, but we as an authority kind of came across as lacking compassion in so much as it was something we were shying away from and not discussing. And I think we should be discussing, we should be acknowledging the difficult circumstances. And as a result of this meeting, The recommendation is really simple, because the inquiry itself is due to have interim findings published, and they can go a number of ways, we don't know. But as the administering authority, all I'm looking for from this meeting is that the council resolves, that it will seek to discuss the current situation with the councils that were involved, that formed Cleveland County Council, and that the council resolves to that an update's brought to full council at a suitable time when that interim decisions come back. For example, that we wish to hold further discussions on it with regards to the findings when they're released, because I do think it is healthy that members are kept up to date. I commend the latest briefing, but it feels forced. The latest one hasn't, it's been great, but we should keep that openness and transparency. And whilst we're the administering authority, by not discussing the issue and providing updates to the victims, it doesn't come across very well, because we're all aware of the situation. We're all getting updates now as members, finally. But we should also keep the victims and those that have made allegations in the picture as to what point it's at, because essentially they've been kept in the dark. They don't know what's happening. They think we don't care as an administering authority, regardless of the outcome. And I just think it requires those resolutions to be put forward. And that's as far as I'll go on the subject, Chair, because I do think it doesn't require any kind of political football with this. Thank you.
Are there any other members that want to speak? Councillor Story.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief as well. Obviously, this isn't something we should politicise, and there's no danger of me doing that. I think that what we need to be very careful of is our use of language on this particular issue. I don't believe that secrecy is the correct word. I would not characterise the way the council has behaved as secrecy. I would also not characterise the briefings that we've had as having been forced. I think that is an inappropriate use of language. I have attended the briefings in the previous administration and in this one, and those briefings have provided councillors with a lot of information, and if any elected members in the room have not attended a briefing about Stanhope Castle, I would strongly recommend that people go to those briefings and hear what the situation is, because a lot of what Councillor Rathmell has set out there for elected members in this room was clearly stated by senior officers to elected members in that briefing, and it was crystal clear to us what's happening and crystal clear what the council's position is. I would like to state, and I'm of the understanding that there are many other members who are of a similar view. It is my view that this extraordinary meeting is not an appropriate forum to discuss this issue. I am concerned about the use of an extraordinary meeting to discuss this. The sensitive and complex nature of this issue does not lend itself to the council chamber. I believe there are other avenues that could have been explored. We are where we are, and I understand that we're having this meeting, but it is my personal viewpoint that we should not be using extraordinary meetings for these kind of purposes. I don't think that is the right way to go about things. What I would like to say is that I do agree with the sentiments that have been expressed by Councillor Rathmell in terms of the resolution. I understand that I think those things are basically happening anyway, but joint working between the councils is fine. Of course, we should do that. And also the second thing that Councillor Rathmell suggests, that any interim inquiry report should be discussed by the council. We should have further briefings as elected members. Of course, we should do those things. I don't expect that there'll be a lot of dispute about that. I would think we should have further briefings, and the council officers should keep us informed of what's going on. But I would like to praise the officers who've been carrying out the work, and I'd also like to praise the previous exec member, Mike Carr, because I think the way Mike and the way officers have dealt with this issue with compassion and with diligence deserves praise. It isn't easy. Nobody finds this easy. This is not a situation that anybody comes to with any particular qualifications necessarily. It's about lessons learned. It's about making sure that as the council goes forward, and as all local authorities go forward, we make sure that children are protected. That's very important to all of us. I know that we're all corporate parents. And I think one thing I do agree with Councillor Rathmell on is that we do need more information. We do need to make sure information flows, because one thing I often say is that information breeds confidence and silence breeds fear. And the more people know about something, the more we talk about something, the more of a safe space we create for people who have issues of this nature, and the more compassion we deal with those people in, the better it is for everybody. So that's all I want to say on the matter, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else who wants to speak on the matter? Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very emotive topic for debate, and I warmly welcome the victims, survivors who are in attendance today. While this is an intensely human story, it is also important that we act responsibly and rationally as a council, and I would urge members to be measured in their speeches tonight. Members will be aware of the issues around Stanhope Castle from the recent briefing on the 19th of July. However, I would like to take the opportunity to reiterate the following points of background. Stanhope Castle was opened in 1941 and was run as an approved school by the Home Office until 1973. Then by Teesside County Borough from 1973 to 1974, and by Cleveland County Council, which ran it as a community home with education. The school was closed in 1981. Cleveland County Council was abolished in 1996, and the responsibility for its liabilities and assets was distributed to the 4 unitary authorities: Middlesbrough, Stockton, Redcar and Cleveland, and Hartlepool. Middlesbrough Council became the designated authority in respect of Stanhope Castle School, inheriting the historic assets and liabilities. This means the council is responsible on behalf of the other 3 authorities within the Cleveland boundary for dealing with any insurance claims arising from the school's operation, although the financial liability is shared between the 4 councils. So Stanhope Castle was never run by Middlesbrough Council, nor was it located in Middlesbrough. Children were sent to the school from authorities across Teesside and the north of England. Only a small proportion of the children attending Stanhope Castle School were from Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough Council's role in this is a designated authority, not as the operator of this institution. Former Stanhope pupils have approached us to seek compensation through the civil justice system as a result of what happened when they were resident at Stanhope Castle. It is in that role as a potential defendant to a civil claim that Middlesbrough stands legally, and claims continue to be progressed on a case-by-case basis, given the evidence base that is available and on the basis of legal advice. As you will know, the council is so-called core participant in the independent inquiry into this child sexual abuse, where Stanhope Castle was cited as a case study in the accountability and reparations module, which looked into what happened when civil claims for abuse were brought. Our 151 officer gave live evidence in the inquiry in December 2018, and we have been awaiting the publication of the inquiry's interim report. The inquiry is required to give core participants a minimum of 4 weeks' notice of publication, and they have recently written to us to give us that notice. That means that while we do not have a definite date for publication, it is quite likely that the interim report will be published during August. As stated in the evidence in the inquiry, we will then take further advice on dealing with the claims we have received. We have been asked about the provision of counselling. I recognise this is not exactly what the victim survivors asked for, but we have acted in good faith in setting up and publicising a single point of contact for victim survivors in the council to give them advice and guidance on how to access specialist support. Several victim survivors have made contact and provided with advice through the means. The council does not have the experience, and therefore it is not in a position to make a clinical judgment about the right form of treatment for individuals. That is the role of the NHS, but we do have expertise in commissioning and can help individuals to access the right form of assessment and treatment. I should add that it would also not make sense to set up a single point of treatment in Middlesbrough. As I said earlier, children were sent to Stanhope from all over the north of England, and victim survivors now live all over the UK and beyond. I firmly believe it is the right of members to debate the issues openly and transparently. However, it is important to be clear about what this meeting can and cannot do. The council cannot make a decision today to fundamentally change the way in which cases are dealt with, because that would require detailed consideration of the financial and other consequences, which are extremely difficult to predict, given that we cannot even reliably say how many children went to Stanhope Castle, based on the records we have been able to collate. Even more fundamentally, the liability is shared between the former Cleveland authorities, and a change of approach would require a decision from all of them, and equally as important, we also need to take into consideration the views of our insurers who are responsible for claims after 1973. None of this removes the importance of this debate or these issues, and I look forward to hearing your views. But I would also like to say there will be further briefings on this, I can assure you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hobson did go over a lot of time there, but as it was a written statement, I decided to let her finish as it was relevant. Are there any other members that wish to speak on this issue? Councillor Arundel.
Thank you, Chair. For clarity, I don't know if we're expected to make some sort of resolution tonight by means of a vote. If that's the case, because of what happened in the former extraordinary meeting, I'd like some clarity on what we're supposed to be voting on, because, in all honesty, there was a lot of confusion about what we were supposed to be voting on in the last one. So if that's the case, if there's something to be voted on, can the motion be put, or a suggestion put, preferably in the form of one sentence, so everybody's perfectly clear what's going on? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody else who wants to speak before I hand it back to Councillor Roth? The Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, obviously, it's an exceptionally emotive and very difficult subject for anyone to talk about. First and foremost, all of our sympathies go to the victims of abuse, and especially sexual abuse, anywhere. And I know there are some victims here tonight. It's been said already that we have to be very careful what we say. As a council, we have to take advice in difficult and tricky areas from lawyers and experts, and we are restricted in what we can sensibly say and not say. So I just want to make that clear. But I want to make something else apparent, is that a lot of officers have dealt with a lot of pressure and a lot of stress over the months and, in fact, years now on this issue. And They don't get any credit. They have had strong emails, difficult phone conversations, patches of abuse, and I think that we need to make sure that we treat all of our council officers with a lot of respect and we allow them to work hard. They are fighting for the council, they're fighting for the victims, and they're trying to do the right thing within the framework of the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else like to speak on the matter? Right, I'm going to pass it back to Councillor Rathmell. If you'd like to sum up, Councillor Rathmell, and also if there are any recommendations at the end, can you make them clear for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This meeting, it was discussed various options to bring this back to full council with the monitoring officer, whose advice I actually relied upon, and I do take it in good faith, and I think it's exceptional advice, and that's why it was brought as an extraordinary meeting. The same way the resolutions that have been presented, the wording was agreed, taking into account the legalities, the sensitivities, and the seriousness of this issue. It's actually enabling us to make progress in the interim period. And that's one thing I would like acknowledging. I think we're all in agreement on them. And to close, I'll just read out each one. There's 2 sentences. First one's very simple. It's for the council to resolve that it would seek to discuss the situation with the other authorities that were involved. So all those that formed Cleveland County Council will discuss this issue with them in the interim period. While we're waiting for this interim report, we can start work on that rather than leaving it suspended in animation. And the second one is for the council to resolve that an update be brought back to the council at a suitable time. For example, we have a further discussion upon the findings and when these are released. Now, by asking for that, I'm not saying members' briefings shouldn't take place first and we shouldn't discuss what can be brought forward publicly. And again, a lot of work with legals being done on this, and I would expect the same at any future meeting. What I would like, though, is to see it brought back to full council, because that means a lot to the victims and those that have been victims at Stanhope. The fact that we're not shying away from our role. I mean, we are an administering authority. We should be proud that we've took that responsibility from Cleveland Council, from Cleveland County. Obviously, we shouldn't be proud of the abuse people have suffered and alleged to have suffered, but we should be proud that we're actually taking responsibility and we're dealing with this situation and in a compassionate way. And that's all I'm asking for. So I'd just like to move those 2 resolutions, and I believe the monitoring officer will be able to provide further clarity if it's needed. Thank you.
Probably go through his recommendations. I think that's probably what confused the situation last time, is that if when it was turned into a motion, people were then confused as to what was going on. So I don't know if that assists, I hope so. We will clarify shortly the end of the last meeting and what the conclusion was for that.
Is everybody in agreement with Councillor Rathmell's recommendations? So if everyone's in agreement with Councillor Rathmell's recommendations, can I just clarify there was some confusion at the end of the last meeting. There was some confusion at the end of the first meeting. To clarify, the vote was 10 for and 2 against to report to come back to notify on work currently being done. I hope that covers the confusion. Behave you. Yeah. So with that done, I would like to bring this extraordinary meeting of Middlesbrough Council to a close. Thank you, everyone.